And we're live. And we are with Oli Larkin. Hello, Oli.
Hello,
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you today. We've known each other for a long time. We even worked on the same code for the midnight plugins for Focusrite. And now, I mean, and at the time already you were involved with iPlug because this was a plugin that was built with iPlug. Now, you have worked on it for over 10 years, and you are releasing the first update that has a big number, I mean, number two of iPlug. So in 12 years, this is the first major upgrade, and I think this is the first time you're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I have done a few conference presentations, but I've not done any live streams before. First ever live stream, so
Great. Well,
yeah, I'm
we're
excited.
honored to we are honored to have you. So everyone who joins us today, you are most welcome to ask questions to Oli about his work, about iPlug, about C++, about web audio, which is a particular topic of interest for him, and a big feature of iPlug2, I understand. He will do a presentation here, but we can also take a pause in the presentation. Is okay with taking questions as they come. So I will bring up your presentation slides, Oli, and leave it over to you.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to introduce iPlug2. I'm going to start off with a bit of stuff about my background and how I got into audio programming. And yeah, I'll talk about the history of iPlug and highlight some of the exciting new features about the new version. And I want to say straight off the bat, this is not just my project. There's an awful lot of the work has been done by Alex Harker, and we've also had some really great third-party contributions via GitHub, which we're really, really grateful for. And if anyone else wants to come in and help with the project, there's lots of work to be done, and we'd really like to get more people involved, contributing pull requests and things like that. So a bit about me. I basically, I got into music technology as a teenager, and I was trying to produce electronic music, basically, but got interested in some of the more far out kinds of audio processing, like granular synthesis and things like that, and got into slightly weirder bits of software like Audio Mulch and other stuff. And yeah, when I decided what I wanted to do at university, I was kind of interested in doing a course where I could learn a bit about the more experimental side of electronic music, rather than, there's lots of courses where you can learn about like pretty standard music production stuff, recording bands and orchestras and things like that. But I was introduced to like kind of the academic world of electronic music and things like acousmatic music and that stuff. And the kinds of tools that were used in that world were pretty interesting to me. So I ended up going to uni and studying sort of music technology and sound art stuff. After university, I got a job in a research centre at Leeds University, where I was working on a European project, which was called iMaestro, and it used MaxMSP, lots of OpenGL stuff. After that, I got a job at York University, where I was supporting various research projects and sort of collaborations with sound artists and arts organizations. And I got to work on some quite exciting, like big, quite large scale sound art projects there, which was great. But in parallel to all of that, I've been making my own plugins and selling them online, but also working on the iPlug plugin framework. And I've become quite passionate about the tools that that other people can use to make plugins as well, and making the framework really nice, as well as making my own products with it. So yeah, this journey in terms of programming really starts with Synthedit, which some people may be familiar with. It's a Windows application, which is kind of like a modular environment, and it was around the early 2000s when VST first came out. It was used by a lot of people on the KVR forum, and it was really quite special, I think. And it's got a little bit of a bad reputation because a lot of people made some really bad stuff with it, but a lot of people made some really interesting things with it too. And because it's like a modular thing, a bit like Max or Reactor, it's very approachable for people who are perhaps not from a programming background. When I started using it, I hadn't really done any programming before. And you can make a nice user interface in Photoshop, and I think it was PaintShop Pro at the time I was using. And you can export bitmaps and make a pretty professional GUI. And there were a lot of people making some like really creative and interesting things with it. Some of the modules in Synthedit were pretty good, to be honest, like high quality oscillators and envelopes that were quite tight and snappy. And it had a sort of a voltage control system, which is a bit like what you get in VCV rack and on Euro rack hardware these days. And this was the early 2000s, and it was it was really cool. So I made some things with this, and some of those I started selling. The first of which was this Endless Series suite, which is 3 plugins based on the Shepherd Tone illusion. So yeah, I released these as Windows VST plugins. And yeah, as my sort of professional life carried on and I started working with more Mac machines, I was more interested in making cross-platform software and being able to reach people who would use Pro Tools and things like that. So at some point I decided to switch from Synthedit to use Max to make plugins. So I released these ones in 2003, and then in 2007 I released version 2 of the Endless series using Plugo. So Plugo was a sort of, it was a package of plugins built with Max, but it was also the name for the technology that was part of Max that let you export plugins. And I used that to release these. So that was a little bit not quite as smooth as making plugins with Synthedit, because you had to distribute the Plugo runtime or tell people to go and download this Plugo runtime thing in order to use your plugins. But it was really good because I could target Pro Tools formats and Mac and Windows at the same time. But at some stage, Cycling 74 discontinued Plugo, and that sort of became Max for Live, which is really cool, but it's limited to use in Ableton Live. And I wanted to make plugins that could work in lots of different DAWs. So I kind of had to bite the bullet and say, right, I'm gonna do a proper C++ plugin. Sort of in parallel to all of this, I'd been learning C++, but I'd been doing it on a level where I'd been sort of looking at things like Max objects or Synthedit objects. So both Max and Synthedit, they have their own SDKs, and it's kind of like writing a VST plugin, but because you're focusing on a much smaller aspect of the program, maybe you're just making an oscillator or just making a bit of logic to process a message. It was quite a good way of sort of easing myself into programming. I also did a lot of JavaScript stuff with Max. But yeah, at some stage I said, right, I've got to do the entire plugin in C++ like the pros do. And I was a bit sort of wary at this stage of depending on other people's technologies. So I was depending on Synthedit, and then I was depending on Cycling 74's Max. And you know, if other people change their plans or change the license on things, then you can end up finding yourself in an awkward position with your project. So that's what made iPlug appealing to me in a way, because it had a liberal license. So the first plugin I made with iPlug, which was fully C++, was Endless Series version 3. That came out in 2011. And I sort of made a DSP library in C++ at the same time, so that I could recreate all of the oscillators and things that I was doing in the previous plugins. But this combined all of those plugins into a single plugin. And I brought this out for the new Pro Tools AAX format and VST3 and things like that. So I'll just go on to the next step in my plugin journey before I switch on to talking about iPlug specifically. And that was, in terms of my own professional products that I've released, the next thing I released was VirtualCZ, which I released in 2014. And it's under the Plugin Boutique brand. So they handle all the marketing and the sort of business side of it. But I sort of wrote all the DSP, and I did work with a GUI designer, but I had it was really my my sort of ideas for the GUI and my direction on the project. And yeah, this was made with iPlug2, but at this stage I was a bit more comfortable with C++, and it's actually made with what I call iPlug 1.5, which is a version of iPlug that I never released publicly, which is very much tied to the Steinberg VST3 SDK. Anyway, I'll show you a web version of that in a minute, but it looks like that's been posted already to the chat. But so back to talking about iPlug. iPlug was first released in 2007, and its original developer is this guy called John Schwartz, who is one of the two main developers of Reaper in the company Cocos. So yeah, I haven't got this link to paste into the chat, but this is the original thread on the Cocos forum from 2007 where he uploaded this. And originally this was part of the Cocos WDL library, which is their library of open source code. And the original version 1, it did VST2 and audio unit format plugins. And yeah, I took this code and I fixed some bugs. I added VST3 format and I think RTAS, which is the old Pro Tools format, and I added AAX as well. And yeah, I fixed some bugs, and I sort of made an environment around the original code, which basically included like quite well-defined Visual Studio projects and Xcode projects, so that it was quite easy to start off a new plugin project, and you didn't have to go and manually configure all of the settings in the IDE. And that was one of the main stumbling blocks for me when I wanted to get started programming. The VST2 SDK was really quite useless in terms of making it easy for people who weren't already very knowledgeable programmers to get started. So the tutorial projects normally wouldn't compile, and you'd have to know your way around the IDE to be able to make anything. That was something I tried to address with my version of iPlug2, which was called WDLOL. Anyway, a few years ago, after that code was rotting quite badly on GitHub, but still getting quite a lot of stars, just compared to the competition, which is basically juice in terms of cross-platform plugin frameworks. What you could do with iPlug was really quite limited. It had this like GUI system that was totally bitmap based. Really, you could draw basic lines, but yeah, compared to Juice with the sort of vector graphics stuff, iPlug was really showing its age. So me and my friend Alex decided to try and sort of refresh it, and we had quite a few things that we wanted to address. So the most important of those, I just mentioned, it was trying to have a better vector graphics backend. So this is really important these days because most laptops, or at least most Mac laptops, have Retina screens, so high DPI resolutions. Lots of people with desktop machines have sort of these massive 4K screens, and people want to be able to resize their plugin user interface to the size they want. They want to maybe drag it from one screen to another, one of which is high DPI, one of which is normal resolution, and all of these things have to be handled seamlessly by the plugin framework. So that was a big deal. Also, more and more plugins have fancy animations, and the original iPlug was sort of capped at 25 frames per second, and wasn't really up to the task of doing like really fast, smooth animations on a high DPI screen. So yeah, the original graphics backend was a software renderer, and yeah, the hard truth these days is that if you want to do decent performance animations without maxing out your CPU, you need to use a graphics backend that's capable of doing lots of stuff on the GPU. So we wanted to investigate that. Another feature we wanted to look at was to be able to target the web. So I worked on this project called Web Audio Modules, which is an SDK for porting C++ audio plugins to run in the browser via web audio. So that's the main developer on that project is this guy called Jari Klamola, and I was involved in the project sort of because I'd done quite a lot of plugin stuff. We got together and I had some suggestions about how that would work, and we published a paper at the Web Audio Conference and at the Sound and Music Computing Conference about that. But I wanted to make this a big part of iPlug, so make it as easy to build a web audio module as it is to build a VST or an audio unit. Also wanted to support this new AUV, or relatively new AUV3 format on iOS, and yeah, maybe one day we'll support Android, but for the time being, just looking at iOS because the audio performance there is much better. Yeah, the original iPlug had some slightly, I don't know, naive approach, a slightly naive approach to thread safety. So it's been bugging me for a long time, this, and I really wanted to improve the way that we deal with the multi-threading in the audio plugin setup. So that was something that's been improved massively in iPlug2. Another aspect was making it so that you weren't tied to iPlug's graphics system. which is called igraphics. You could use the framework with whatever GUI toolkit you wanted on top. So I'll talk about that a bit later, but it's possible to stick different things on top of the iPlug base layer, which is potentially quite exciting for some uses. So yeah, that's kind of a bit boring stuff, but yeah, the original code was not very modern, and by updating and using some functionality from C++11, we've done some cool stuff which allows you to write things with much less code than you might normally need to, using things like lambda functions and that kind of thing. So the core thing in iPlug really is the definition of what an iPlug project is. And if you go to the iPlug GitHub page, you'll find there's an examples folder with lots of subfolders for different examples, but they're also template projects. And that folder includes everything that you need to build these multi-format plugins, but it's not just about building the binaries, it's also got scripts to build installers. It's got a script to build the web audio module version as well. And yeah, it's got the Xcode workspace, the Visual Studio solution, a few sort of C++ files here. You can also make your own subfolder and put extra source code in there. And it's got a sort of well-defined layout, which basically means that you know, if you're just getting into this, you can follow the examples and put your resources in a certain place, and hopefully the Xcode project and Visual Studio solution and the script to build a web audio module will find all those things and put them in the right place. And basically you should be able to get that Xcode project and click compile, and it builds, and you don't have to mess around for too long, you know, working out how the IDE setting should be or that kind of thing. You do have to download some SDKs, but that's about it. So yeah, that's a list of the examples. There's like the iPlug effect, which is the basic volume control, iPlug instrument, which is a good starting point for building a synth, and we've got this nice MPE capable synthesizer class in iPlug2. There's a project called iPlug controls, which I'll show you in a second, which has got a sort of demonstration of all the widgets that are available in the igraphics library. And there's a bunch of sort of more specialized examples, which might be a good starting point if you wanted to make a drum synthesizer, for example. That one's set up so that it's got multi outputs, so that your kick drum can go to the first stereo output and your snare can go to the second one, and that kind of thing. Yeah, so some of these are actually built as web audio modules, and you can actually go to the URL here and try some of them in the browser. Now, one of the things that really drew me to iPlug in the first place was that the implementation for a plugin is really, really simple. There's not much C++ code that you have to implement to do quite a lot of things. So this is the volume control example, which has a GUI and it processes audio, and it's about 35 lines in the main C++ file. There is a little bit of extra code in the header file, and there's a config file where you set up some constants. But yeah, I sort of feel that having such a small amount of code is quite good when you're just getting into programming, or if you're trying to be creative with a project, if you don't have to implement tons and tons of functions, and you can just iterate on things quite quickly with a small amount of code, I think that can be really helpful, and sort of stimulate your creativity. And yeah, one of the things that I like about iPlug. On the flip side, it's, iPlug is very targeted at making plugins, and if you wanted to build a complete DAW or any sort of large scale app, I would totally recommend people to use other frameworks for that. But iPlug, I think, is really good for doing plugins. Not to say other frameworks aren't also really good for doing that, but anyway. One of the new features that I've very recently added to the iPlug sort of project setup is basically integrated continuous, I always say that, integrated continuous integration. So GitHub have got some quite exciting new functionality on their repositories. And if you don't know what CI is, it's a way of building your audio, or building any kind of programming project. You can do it remotely, but you can build it automatically when you commit changes to your project. And GitHub have got this solution called Github Actions, which lets you actually build your projects in the cloud, and you can build the Mac, Windows, and the web audio version directly on GitHub. So if I've got time at the end, I might do a live demo of this, but this is all integrated into the iPlug project system. And I didn't actually mention it, but there's a duplication script which lets you take an iPlug project and make a new one very quickly with a different name. And when you do that, it's going to copy in these YAML files, which will build this all for you if you then put your project on GitHub. So that's one of the cool, exciting new features, I think. Now to talk a bit more about the major change in iPlug2, which is the vector graphics setup. So one of the things we did with iPlug when we wanted to make iPlug2, we abstracted the graphics to a slightly higher level, so that instead of just using this thing called Lice, which was the original igraphics drawing engine, we could now try and swap in different graphics engines to basically experiment and see which one had the best performance and that kind of thing. And we've got several different options, but the two that I'm sort of most happy with at this stage are one called NanoVG, which is an entirely GPU-based vector graphics library. It's the same thing that VCV Rack uses for its drawing. This is a very lightweight library, which we include directly in iPlug2. On the other hand, we have this library Skier, which is a heavyweight library. So it's quite hard to build. So that's something that you have to download separately. But we've got some scripts which will download pre-built binaries for you. But Skier is a really high quality graphics library. It's Google's graphics library, basically, and it's what's used by Chromium and Android and Flutter, and it's being constantly developed. It has lots of interesting functionality and looks really nice. It's also got different backends for things like Metal or DirectX, and so yeah, this is my favorite graphics backend. But you have to sort of, if you download iPlug, you have to switch out the some preprocessor macros in order to use Skia. That's all documented on our wiki. Yeah, another one of these graphics backends is the HTML5 Canvas. So if we build web audio modules from our iPlug projects, you can either use NanoVG, which uses WebGL, or you can use the HTML5 Canvas backend. And this is just to demonstrate we can do exciting things like gradients now, and we can do paths, which we can stroke and fill, and SVGs. So this is another cool thing that I've added very recently, which only works with the Skia backend, but yeah, it's this way of doing fragment shaders. So if you're using Skia and it's using one of the GPU options, you can attach a control which, instead of drawing using the normal draw methods on igraphics, it does all its drawing like in a fragment shader, basically. So this is a language called the Skia shading language, and it's cool. I was wondering how to do this for quite a long time, because nowadays there's lots and lots of different technologies for doing accelerated graphics, and yeah, lots of people write shaders using the GL shading language, but on iOS and macOS these days, GL is deprecated. So how to use shaders in a cross-platform plugin framework? Fortunately, Google have a solution which is part of the Skia graphics backend that I was just able to use. This is their own shading language, which is very similar to GLSL, and yeah, I've integrated it so that you can use it in iPlug iControl widgets, which is quite exciting for things like real-time visualizations and anything that might be really expensive to draw normally. You can possibly optimize it by doing it on a shader, which will run on the GPU and may be a lot faster. So just a quick overview of the controls library. So in igraphics, each widget is called an iControl, and the original library had a few bitmap-based controls, but iPlug2 has got a whole load of vectorial controls, which have a sort of a style that you can customize. And there's a bunch of controls that are based around SVGs as well. So just like you can with VCV rack modules, you can make sliders and knobs that are based on SVGs that you design in Inkscape and that kind of thing. And yeah, there's things like multi-sliders and XY pads, and also meters and oscilloscopes. And these kinds of visualization widgets are things that are often quite difficult to work out how to do when you're just starting. And so I wanted to provide a set of ready-made oscilloscopes and things like that, metering widgets that suggested a way that you can make the real-time audio thread or connect the data from the real-time audio thread and the GUI and do it in a thread-safe way. Yeah, and this all is it's a bit of a complicated technical topic, but in order to do the web audio stuff, we need to be able to have the GUI and the DSP in quite separate entities, and that proves a problem if you want to do visualization. You have to somehow pipe the data from the audio side of things to the place where the GUI is. And so iPlug2 has got these classes which help with that and deal with all of the sending of the data behind the scenes. Another one of the exciting new features is integration of Webviews. So nowadays, a lot of software is made using web technologies, even desktop apps like Visual Studio Code or Slack. Even they're built using Electron, which is it's a kind of a framework that uses Chromium, and I think it uses Node.js as well, but it does its GUI using the web technology, so HTML and CSS, and that's cool, but it involves using the Chromium embedded framework and the Electron system, which is quite a large dependency, which you wouldn't really want to use in plugins because it's like 200 megabytes or something like that. But there are other ways of doing web views, and yeah, on Mac for a while there have been high quality. It's called a WK WebKit view, so that's been a high quality web view for Mac OS and iOS for quite a while. But recently, Microsoft added a new web view to Windows, so this sort of makes it viable to use web views in audio plugins. And there's two ways of using web views in iPlug. You can actually embed a web view inside an igraphics GUI. So in this little GIF, I have the white area is actually a web view. That's a web page, and everything else is drawn using the igraphics library. I've sort of made a sort of easy way for you to communicate between the two. So you can, there's a little bit of JavaScript you can call in response to clicking a button in the web view, and then get a callback on the C++ side, and the same vice versa. You can quite easily get a callback in the web view based on clicking a button in the igraphics view. So yeah, that's one of the ways you can use a web view in iPlug2, but there is another way, which is to get rid of igraphics altogether and to do the GUI using entirely using the web view. So next I wanted to just talk about the web audio module side of things and possibly do a quick demo of VirtualCZ running in the browser. So I mentioned the web audio modules project already. These are two web audio modules built using iPlug2. So yeah, virtualcz.io, and here's another one, which is it actually originally came from some code that was on the MaxMSP forum to emulate this thing called a Forces, which is a sort of noisy device. But yeah, I'm gonna just try and share my web audio module and play some audio with that, which you can also try in your own browser. It will work best in Chrome. Let me click stop and share screen. This one.
Yeah, let's make sure that you share the audio as well from the Chrome tab.
Okay, yeah.
And everyone who's watching, you can also go to virtualcz.io, and you have you can plug in your own MIDI controller in there, and it makes sound.
Yeah, so hopefully now you're seeing this website, virtualcz.io. Are you seeing that, JB?
Yes, absolutely, we see it. Let's test the sound. Yes, we have it as well.
So yeah, normally if you've got a MIDI device connected, you can click on this drop down here, and it'll show your your MIDI device, and you select that, and using Web MIDI, it's then completely playable. And yeah, so if I want to build this, it's just a matter of running this script in the scripts folder of an iPlug project. There's various things you can do, like so it can save the state of your plugin. And what else can we do? We can yeah, there's a few things that aren't quite working yet on this website anyway, but in the future, I'd like to make it so that you could actually make presets in the web-based version and then load them in the VST version, that kind of thing. But yeah, some of the stuff I've disabled because I didn't want to give the entire product away for free in the web page. But yeah, this works well in Chrome. It doesn't work so well in Safari, and it really doesn't work very well on mobile, which is a bit of a pain. But yeah, Microsoft Edge, the new version, uses Chromium, and Firefox has recently added support for the technology which is called the audio worklet, which is what allows us to do sort of DSP that doesn't glitch loads in the browser, custom DSP that doesn't glitch loads.
Yeah, I think we could just take a moment to talk a little bit more about web audio and the possibilities. Because just to summarize, if people have not understood, but I'm sure they have, you know, people seem excited about this, and there are reasons to be. Because if you use iPlug, you can make a plugin, but also the same code can actually run immediately in the web browser. So you can create, like you did, an example of your plugin before people buy it, so they can try a version outside of an audio workstation. But then they know exactly what it does. So that's really interesting. But is there a market in itself? Like, what is the landscape like in your experience for web audio and like web applications?
Well, yeah, there are quite a few web DAWs on the scene now, and one of those does support web audio modules, which is Amp Studio, which is developed by Yari, who worked on the web audio modules. So yeah, in terms of the commercial market, I don't have any info about the sort of amount of users and things like this, and whether it's I'm not really sure at this stage if it's a commercially viable thing for plugin developers. But what is kind of interesting to me for web audio modules is, as you said, making demo versions that are very quick to try. You don't have to go through the whole install process. You can also add sort of documentation to a web page using the rich functionality of HTML and CSS to do things that I mean, I'm not thinking about like a little paperclip that pops up and tells you how to use the plugin, but you know, something that helps the person get used to using the product which they buy in a different format, or helps them manage their presets collection. And the web MIDI stuff is pretty cool. Like, there's quite a lot of companies these days who do firmware updates and things like that in the browser, which is fantastic because you don't have to, you know, go and download something. It's all just, you know, click of a button, go to a link, and yeah, via web MIDI update your device.
Yeah,
unfortunately, Apple don't seem to be interested. But
I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, Apple aren't interested. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So yes, the main issue for scaling web audio, I understand, is compatibility over different browsers, and most Apple users are using Safari, especially on mobile.
Yeah.
On desktop, you have a choice, but on mobile, it's a bit harder.
Yeah,
Because
that's
everything
right.
by default is Safari, and web audio doesn't run properly there. So that's an issue. But so that's probably the main obstacle really to getting web applications really kicking off, but you've been working on it for a number of years. I've seen you presenting at the Web Audio Conference.
Hmm.
Do you think there's a growing community around web audio applications?
I think there is, and there's some very, very cool things I've seen with it. In particular, like the web, there's just so much stuff you can do in the browser that's just amazing. Like, and combining that with web audio is quite exciting. So it's a bit of a tangent to go on, but I really like a library called A-Frame, which is for WebVR, WebXR, and there's people integrating web audio with that to do sort of spatial audio and things like this. And yeah, just the sort of melting pot of all these different sort of creative coding JavaScript libraries in the browser is just quite an exciting place. So yeah, there's definitely lots of potential. I'm not so sure about the commercial side of things yet, but I think maybe in a few years' time.
Yeah, and that brings a question about security. Yeah, it's. I mean, we remember how. I mean, I remember how difficult it was 20 years ago to update the firmware of your MIDI controller. Now you
Yeah,
can just plug in the web, and it's friendly. It gives you all of this UI, response. But yeah, are there any security implications?
definitely. And there's very lengthy discussions on the web audio sort of W3C pages where they're sort of talking about proposals and things, and definitely on the web MIDI spec. There's lots of developers from Google and Mozilla and some people from Apple saying, this is a problem because of this and this. And I mean, Firefox, I think they're considering web MIDI now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the SysEx support is maybe more of a security issue than just MIDI notes and things like that. So yeah, Apple recently put out a statement about all these exciting new web things that you can do in Chrome, which they're not going to support because it might compromise security in terms of people being tracked when they don't realize it and stuff like that.
Right, and to be specific, the main security issue is has to do with the device itself. So not with your computer, because the web browser is completely sandboxed, so it doesn't risk anything to your computer, but it might override the existing firmware and put a dummy one or something that would damage your controller. I mean, that's the main risk, right?
I haven't put a great deal of thought into it, to be totally honest, but I think the idea of tracking people via something that some bit of equipment that might identify you, that's connected via one of these like web USB or web MIDI or some kind of technology that might identify you when you're not, your security settings aren't allowing you to be identified, but there's this little way of finding out who you are, something like that. But that would be a good thing to ask a real web audio expert. I'm not sure I'd say I am, but
okay. Well,
web technology expert.
We seem to have some people who would know more about this than me, for sure. We're commenting on YouTube, so thank you, Atsushi Bounder News as well, who's commenting about all of this. So yes, thank you. I'm going to let you go back to your slides, but I just wanted to take a moment about this, because I think it's interesting for anyone who aspires to be a developer and an audio developer, that there is an opportunity. There will be more opportunities in the future to go the web route, and you can do it with C++, and then you're compatible everywhere. But if this is something that's difficult, programming for the web has lower barriers to entry than C++. So it's JavaScript, and it's a bit simpler. And there are resources out there to get you started. So yeah, I just thought we'd hear your opinion on that. And thanks, Atao, I increased my volume now. Okay, so over to you. We have the presentation here. I'm going to disappear again. Oh, no.
Okay, so the next new feature I wanted to talk about is this support for iOS and the Audio Unit v3. So yeah, if you fire up an Xcode workspace from the iPlug project, you see two Xcode projects as sub-projects, and one of those is for iOS, one of those is for macOS, and it's as simple as choosing the target from the targets menu in Xcode, and you can build exactly the same code that you would for a desktop plugin to work on your iOS device. And if you're on, I think it's Catalina is the limit, but if you're on Catalina, it will work in the simulator because the simulator supports Metal on Catalina, but otherwise you have to use a real device. So yeah, this was quite a lot of work, and it was a lot more than I bargained for, because I sort of realized, oh well, now we're running these plugins on a multi-touch device. I have to make igraphics, the GUI library. I have to make that work with multi-touch, and that was quite a big shift from how it worked originally. But now it does, and you can move two controls with different fingers at the same time, and you can also make a single eye control that responds to multiple touches. And I also integrated the iOS gesture recognizers, so any eye control widget can respond to double taps, triple taps, three finger taps, swipe left, swipe up, down, left, right, whatever. So yeah, I don't think anyone has released an iOS plugin with iPlug yet, but I've been experimenting a lot, and I think it's pretty robust now. Yeah, so yeah, this works in all of the iOS DAWs like OM and GarageBand and that kind of thing, as well as building a standalone app. So this is a screenshot of OM, and I just wanted to sort of demonstrate two of the other ways of doing GUIs with iPlug, which are examples. So the yellow thing here is using UIKit, which is the Apple iOS GUI toolkit. So that's the sort of iPlug base layer. So you get the iPlug project with, which compiles straight away, unlike Apple's example code, but you can put your own GUI on top using the GUI framework that is specifically designed for by Apple for iOS devices. And that's something that people might want to do if they're going to just target iOS and they want a really slick experience for their AUV3 plugin. Yes, hi Martin. Yes, you do need to sign up to the Apple Developer Program. And nowadays, even if you want to make plugins that work on the desktop Mac, you need to sign up to the Apple Developer Program, because you have to code sign and notarize your plugin binaries. But yeah, definitely for iOS development, if you want to release anything, you have to have a developer account or be signed up to the developer program. But yeah, so I don't know if people know, but on iOS with these AUV3 plugins, there's a memory barrier, something like 350 megabytes. And if your plugin goes over that, I can't quite remember if it's all the AUV3 plugins or all the instances of your plugin. If they go over that, it just kills the plugin. And it seems like Apple's GUI toolkits are very light on memory. compared to using igraphics, which what we do for igraphics is make a big metal view. And just doing that, even without doing any of the igraphics drawing, seems to use about 50 megabytes of RAM. So if you were making a sample-based instrument and your memory was really like something that you're up against, then yeah, that might be another reason to use Swift. Marcus, hello. I have experimented with Swift UI, but I haven't done anything serious with it yet. I've seen there's some people in the audio kits community have been using it. And actually, I should do a shout out to Audio Kit, because the iPlug Swift example actually uses some of their GUI widgets via CocoaPod thing. But the other plugin here is using HTML and CSS, which is a entirely web technology based UI. A really terrible UI, but yeah, you could make it much nicer and use something like React or something more modern to make something dynamic and interesting. Hi, Martin. So on iOS, it's ARM chips, or Apple Silicon, I guess it's called now. And that uses Neon, which is the ARM SIMD technology. So it's like using SSE. Yeah, so quickly I wanted to mention the fact that as well as making plugins, iPlug's always been quite tied to Reaper, which is my favorite DAW. It's a really lightweight and powerful, flexible DAW. And it's got its own SDK and API, and you can build what are called Reaper extensions, which they're plugins, but they're not audio plugins. They don't process audio on one of the tracks. I think you can do offline audio processing with them. But yeah, iPlug it has an example project which will very quickly build a Reaper extension using the igraphics toolkit for the GUI in a similar way as you might do for a plugin. But of course, it's not doing any real-time audio processing. Here's a little animated GIF which shows how that works. So yeah, you can add actions which appear in this extensions window, bring up your own GUIs, and access lots of sort of Reaper power user functionality, like calling actions to create tracks and change colors of things and stuff like that. And you can also embed the web views and everything that you can do in igraphics, you could do in your Reaper extension window. Marek says, does the web view use a lot of RAM? So actually on iOS, I was testing that because I was thinking perhaps it would do, and it might come up against that that memory barrier and kill my audio unit. But it turns out it doesn't, and I'm not quite sure if I was not looking correctly at the RAM usage. It's a bit weird because when you use a web view, it's actually doing an IPC, so it's running the web view in a separate process. So you've got to think about what that process is using in terms of memory, as well as your main plugin process. But yeah, on iOS, when I was experimenting with that, the web view example barely uses any memory compared to like the Swift example, which also uses barely any. So those two use about the same. But then if I use igraphics for the UI, it's using a lot more memory. Okay, so another cool thing in iPlug2 is support for the Faust programming language. And Faust is a DSL for audio DSP. It's a domain-specific language. And it's a functional language which is very much targeted at making the sorts of graph-like connections that you get in audio DSP. And it's got a very cool library of lots of different signal processing techniques. And a lot of that is based on literature from Stanford University. So you can match up the actual code implementation to sort of more theoretical implementations, which is really interesting and cool. But one of the problems I've had in the past when I've tried to use Faust is that it's quite hard to combine bits of Faust with bits of C++. You can turn your Faust DSP file, that's the name of the Faust file format, it's a .dsp text file. You can use some of the Faust scripts to spit out a VST or a max MSP external. But if you want to combine your Faust DSP with some other processing that's in C++, it's a bit fiddly, and you have to make what's called an architecture file, and it's not much fun. So this is something that I've tried to address in iPlug2 and made it quite easily to have a certain audio block that's processed through a Faust DSP file. And I've also made it so that you can integrate the just-in-time compiler that comes with Faust, and you can use that whilst you're sort of prototyping your audio plugin, so that you don't have to recompile. You don't have to do the sort of whole recompile cycle in Xcode or Visual Studio. You can just, sorry, I got a cramp. I've got this great office chair, but I do end up getting cramped with it sometimes. Pardon me. I just
take your time. Take your time, Oli. I'm happy to feel the void while you recover here. Sorry, go on. Are you ready?
Oh, just about. I'm going to just play the video that I'm about to play, and I'll massage my leg whilst I do that.
Okay.
So this is in Reaper, and you won't hear the audio, I don't think, but you can see I'm editing the Faust code, and hopefully you can see via the graphs that the DSP is changing, even though I'm not doing any recompiling in Xcode. I'm just editing this text file, and it's watching the text file on the disk, and every time that changes, the Faust JIT compiler compiles it. At the same time, it's also calling the Faust command line and converting that DSP file to a C++ file. So that means when you switch to build the release version of your plugin, which is the optimized version, it will actually, hi Stefan, Stefan's one of the main developers of Faust. So when you switch to the release version, it will use the C++ code that was generated by the command line compiler. So it's quite a nice workflow for iterating on your DSP using the JIT compiler, but then seamlessly switching to compiled code when you want to finally release your optimized version. So I just wanted to finish up with an introduction to some of the sort of community aspects of iPlug2. We've got this main website which has got all the links to everything, and we have a discourse forum, and that's quite good because if people post things there, it stays there forever. But we've got this Slack group as well, which unfortunately is a free account, so anything that gets posted there eventually gets lost. But yeah, on the forum we've got a section for people to show off what they've been making with iPlug2, and some of the intrepid, brave people have made some nice things with it. So this is work of two developers who've been using iPlug2, Sonic Bits and Full Bucket. I hope they don't mind me putting their screenshots in this video, but I was really impressed and happy to see these nice things being made with iPlug2. And yeah, these guys are getting great feedback on KVR about these things that they've made. And I think they're all available for free as well. So yeah, that's a real pleasure to see nice things actually being made with it, because I've got good intentions to rebuild all my products using iPlug2, but right now I'm sort of stuck in framework mode and haven't got there yet. So yeah, it's iPlug2 is a sort of a labor of love, and it's a vast amount of my life has been spent on maintaining this building this and maintaining the previous WDL OL, and currently I'm trying to sort of justify it by getting some sponsorship to be able to spend more of my time on it. Oh god, I've got cramp in the other leg now. This is really bad, but
oh my goodness,
I haven't sat in this chair for quite a while, so
take your time. So someone said on Facebook, Peter said that it's a live stream injury, which is kind of a new kind of injury. That's pretty,
yeah,
that's fair
I'm
enough.
okay now. I'll drink my other glass of water. Anyway, okay. That's the end. So if you'd like to support the project, the best way to do that is via GitHub sponsors. But I also have a Patreon, which is where I'm sort of putting the info about all the new features and that kind of thing. It's got a quite nice blog system, so you can also sponsor there. But yeah, much appreciated if you want to do that. We also like code contributions, as I've said.
I have a question for you, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a second here. Yeah. But you know that the Music Hackspace is embarking into teaching music technologies and why not code? You know, like and would you be up for doing a series of workshops to teach people iPlug?
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that. Yeah,
right.
Something I've been thinking about for a while.
Yeah. Wonderful. I mean, I would love to support what you're doing, and I've just posted the Patreon, and that leads me to another question. Like, obviously, iPlug is free, and that means that you know, you're not getting paid if people use it. Like, if you have a million users or if you have 0, I mean, it doesn't change much for you. So what is the economy like? And people don't pay anything. And there's no dual licensing like there could be in other open source frameworks. That's
right. Yeah, so I mean, it's not very sensible from a financial point of view, but it has the sponsorship has been pretty good lately, actually, and I've had some very generous donations, which I'm very grateful for. Some people have been quite keen to help me make it work on the new Mac chips. So some people sponsored the purchase of a developer kit for that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hobby project that's got a bit out of hand, to be honest, and I do it anyway. But it's it's really nice to make it financially. This is Alex, who is one of the other guy behind iPlug2, I should say. He's done lots of the work. He works for as well as being an academic, he works at Surreal Machines, who makes some very nice plugins. New ones using iPlug2 coming soon.
Great, congratulations.
But yeah, it's a pleasure to see people make things with it, and it's gonna, when I update my plugins, it's gonna help me do hopefully make a better product, because it's works on all these new computers and high DPI screens and that kind of thing. So yes, it's not a very sensible endeavor financially, but it's quite rewarding to see good things happening with it, and especially from I like it because I sort of become a bit of a control freak. Not that I don't take contributions from other people, because I do, but after having used things that depended on other companies' projects that might get taken in a direction that I didn't want, basing the things I make around something that's got an open license is a big deal. And I also, iPlug couldn't exist without all these other things that are released with liberal licenses like NanoVG, and I mean Google get a lot of stick, but they make some really excellent open source libraries that are liberally licensed, and form the backbone of lots of creative projects, which is great. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, there's no right or wrong question. Peter has posted a few examples of plugins built with iPlug. Thank you, Peter, for that. So I'm going to bring them up for those who are not watching on Facebook, because you won't be able to see those. Thank you, Peter, for that. So yeah, I have a lot of other questions, but let me start with one. What is? I mean, are we going to need to wait another 12 years for iPlug 3?
I have actually got a folder on my computer called iPlug2, which is, I'm not really going to do that, but it's as you develop these things more and more, you start to see, where you can make it much better, but at the same time, you would break everything that's ever existed with, and not make it backwards compatible. So I wouldn't say 12 years, but yeah, there's because I've been looking at these technologies, like things like Skia and the way that is going. There's some interesting directions which I might investigate in the future. And one of those is this technology called WebGPU, which is it's the replacement for WebGL, but it also has a sort of native component, which Google have a project called Dawn, which is like a native web GPU solution. So because we've got this cross-platform system that wants to target the web and desktop devices and work well on Windows with DirectX and Apple stuff with Metal, by using this web GPU system, instead of going directly to Metal or directly to DirectX, we can use things like because I'm getting a bit technical here, but there's the GPUs are getting faster and faster and faster, and one of the cool things about web GPU is that you can do compute shaders on them, which has potential for audio processing as well as graphics processing. So that's one thing that I'm quite excited about, potentially for an iPlug3, which might happen. But yeah, I'm also sort of longing to get back into doing audio stuff, because I've been pushing pixels around for too long, really.
Well, we have a great question from Matao Tanaka. Oli, this is astounding work. Perhaps this is a naive question, but you mentioned Juice at the beginning. Why make another plugin framework?
I was about to say variety is the spice of life, but
I mean, there probably are historical reasons as well,
Yeah,
because
I mean,
they started at the same time.
yeah,
Around the same.
when I first wanted to make a plugin in C++, that was before Juice had been acquired by Rolly, and I mean, it was still awesome at that stage. And I've got a great respect for Jules and his project, and I mean, it's great. But again, it was this idea of being able to be in control of all of the code as much as I possibly could be, so that if I invested in this framework, I could go and modify the things that I needed to. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but yeah, I don't know. I get ideas, and my creativity involves tweaking things to do with the plugin framework that I couldn't do if I used Juice. And there was actually a stage where I was going to port all my stuff to Juice, but the problem is it's you want to add this feature, and it involves modifying aspects of the code that are really under the control of the people who at that time worked at Rolly or whatever. And you could do a lot of work and try and submit an absolutely beautiful, perfect pull request, and it might not get merged into the mainstream version of Juice. So yeah, it was. I kind of thinking, well, if I'm going to do loads of work, I mean, I've got this plugin framework that I've spent a vast amount of my life already working on. I may as well make that better rather than try and make this company's thing more, a better product or whatever. Not
Sure.
that they need any help. They're really great programmers. So Juice is brilliant, and I often recommend people to use Juice, even though I make something that is in some ways a competitor. But if you want to do anything that involves plugin hosting, use Juice. If you want to do a sort of large scale application, then Juice's GUI toolkit is much more flexible for multi windows and scrolling areas, and a lot of the things that you might need to do if you're building a full-blown app. Juice is more scalable. iPlug is for doing sort of plugins that have a single window interface, probably that don't have that many controls in them. So it's a more sort of targeted thing.
Right. Well, thank you for a very honest answer about your competitors. So I have a few more question for you, if that's okay. And I encourage anyone to continue to ask questions on the chat, and we will bring them up here. So one of them is about MIDI 2.0. I mean, it's the specifications have been released, and we expect. I mean, there's already hardware products that support it. Now they have very few software to talk with. Is it something that's on your roadmap for 2020 or 2021 to support MIDI 2.0?
No.
Okay.
I haven't really looked at it, to be honest.
Okay.
I'll wait and see what happens in terms of all those devices and things. But yeah, we well, there's a bit of a crossover there with some of the web stuff. Might be, yeah. I can't really talk about it, but yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see if people want it. But I think MIDI 2.0 has the potential to really transform the way hardware and software communicate, and then software also together. I mean, you mentioned your MPE module.
Yeah.
And I think MPE was a great milestone towards a more expressive form of MIDI. And MIDI 2.0 take this to a completely different level. So I think there will be an appetite for this. I mean, I think to support it in a framework will be quite an endeavor, because MIDI 2.0 is magnitude more complex
Right.
than MIDI 1.0. But both of them are kind of backwards compatible. So MIDI 2.0 is built into MIDI 2.0. So yeah, that was a question that you answered quicker than I hoped.
I meant to, I haven't looked into it. I would like to support it, but it's in. I'm not quite clear about the devices yet and that are going to be available and that kind of thing. So
sure. Great. Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned Big Sur and the Apple prototyping on Apple Silicon. So that work has started. You've been sponsored to investigate. So I guess it's going to happen at some point that you support ARM platforms, ARM structure, ARM chips.
Yeah. It compiles. It works. It's. I don't think it's going to be too hard, and so now the next stage is to sort of make sure that the iPlug projects build nice universal binaries that are going to be able to run on both kinds of machines. But yeah, the thing that's not really clear to me at this stage is how important the version 3 audio unit format is going to be on macOS going forward, because it seems like the old audio unit version 2 is still going to work to a degree, but it might be that Apple push the audio unit version 3 and lots of developers have to update their existing products to work with that format.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have someone who's proposing Binder News. Thank you for that on behalf
brilliant.
of Oli to contribute to MIDI 2.0. That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's one of the fantastic thing about open source, which is that you can welcome contributions from others that come in as pull requests or merge requests, and then you can accept it and maybe shape it so that it fits really well in the framework. So yeah, no, that's great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I have to say thank you publicly to Binder News, who's done some excellent pull requests, one of which I really need to look at soon. But he's one of our best contributors.
Wonderful. Okay, well, any question coming from the comments over here as I look for other questions that I prepared, but that you answered very quickly.
Wizzy says, is CMake support something that is planned? And so there's a couple of people who've been working on CMake support for iPlug2, including Binder News, who has replied. And yes, so that is something that I hope to merge into the master branch at some point. I think I will keep the existing project set up though, because certainly CMake was a complete mystery to me for quite a long time, and I really like the fact with iPlug that you just download the zip file or whatever off GitHub and you've got ready-made projects to compile straight away. So we'll go for both CMake and the existing build system, I think.
Right.
Any more questions?
Yes, there's a question about your bookshelf, which one might wonder in these times if it's a real one or not.
You've got to have a bookshelf in the background if you're doing a live stream.
Yeah.
So my favorite book on audio programming. Where is it? I'm going to pull my ears off if I reach back. This was my favorite. It's not directly audio programming, I suppose. It's kind of an introduction to computer music and some of the DSP involved. But this is from the 80s, I think. Hope I'm right about that.
We don't see it well. Who is it from?
It's called Dodge and Jerth Computer Music. And yeah, unlike some other computer music textbooks, this one just really stands the test of time and doesn't, it's avoided talking about lots of things that are just totally irrelevant these days. So that's one of my favorite books. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. There's lots of other great audio programming books, but
yeah, and I suppose today the best way to have a career, certainly as of today in the music industry, audio industry, is to learn C++. I mean, there's currently no other way. You can maybe C# could give you access to Windows, but then it's kind of limited to that. But web audio and web MIDI are opening doors as well for JavaScript developers. So that's an interesting opportunity, I suppose. But you can't use JavaScript in iPlug. You have to know C++ as well.
Yeah. So iPlug will, when you're doing the web audio stuff, it will compile your C++ code to WebAssembly, which then gets, there's a bit of JavaScript that loads the WebAssembly and a bit of HTML and stuff to package your iPlug GUI into the web page. But in terms of the actual DSP, that's all done inside C++.
Right.
That's, yeah, I mean, Soul, the project that Jules is working on, is really exciting for web audio, I think, because it might not be obvious, but what we do with iPlug is to use this thing in scripting to convert what is basically quite a lot of code to run in the browser. So particularly, like if we're using NanoVG in the browser, we're compiling the NanoVG library to work in the browser, which is reproducing certain things that already exist in the browser for doing graphics. You can even, I mean, if you're using strings and things like this, or certain C++ libraries, you're reproducing a lot of functionality in WebAssembly that might already exist available to the browser. And I didn't show, but the web audio modules that we create are, as far as websites go, they're quite large packages. So they're around about 1 megabyte for the iPlug effect example, the volume control.
Did you say 1 megabyte?
Yeah, which is big for a website.
Right.
I mean, there's, if you go to YouTube, of course, you're watching a video that streams that's going to be massive anyway. But and to be honest, on most fast connections, these web audio modules do load pretty quickly. But the reason I said Soul was quite interesting for this is that could generate a very small piece of WebAssembly that was not involving compiling lots of code that is reproducing functionality that's already there in the web browser. It's just going to make the tiny little bit of WebAssembly that's going to do the audio processing. And yeah, so if people are interested in doing web audio stuff, they might like to check out that. But you can also do like custom web audio code in JavaScript that runs quite nicely. And yeah, I recommend just going to the Web Audio Conference website and checking out some of the recent presentations from the last 2 years about that, if you want to learn that stuff.
Right. And I just posted the Soul website in the comments. Soul.dev is definitely an interesting project on which I used to work on. I mean, not on the development, of course, but alongside the team when I was working with Juice. And it is a fantastic promise of making audio shaders. So making to audio what happened with GPUs as well. So both the language OpenGL and the hardware acceleration. So there's some interesting potential for optimization of audio in the future with Soul. It's a grand project though, so
Definitely.
it needs a lot of support. So we have a few more questions. So there's one question from John, and I think he asked it twice. So my apologies for missing it, John. So unit testing. What do you think of unit testing with iPlug?
Okay, so as well as the CI stuff that I showed, we also have a sort of CI for anything that I commit to the master branch, and that has a whole bunch of unit tests in terms of, you know, it's using Dave Rowland's plugin Val, and it also runs the audio unit validator, and Steinberg also have their own validator. So it's got, you know, tests in that sense. I've been looking at some unit testing frameworks as well recently to do some more specific testing on the iPlug code base, but it's quite a lot of stuff to test really if you want to do it properly. So I've been avoiding it so far, but the YAML files that I've done for GitHub Actions, I might add some validation to that, so it calls the audio unit validator and that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers the question.
Right. So there is another question as well. Have you tried, for Matsushi Eno, have you tried web audio outcomes on mobile devices?
Yes, I have, and unfortunately, I mean, I'm an iOS person, so I'm mostly trying it on iOS, and it's limited to the Safari browser. So Safari doesn't support the audio worklet, which is this element of the web audio API that's allowing us to do sort of customized WebAssembly processing. It does support this old thing called the script processor node. But the problem with that is that the audio processing is done on the same thread that everything else is doing. You know, like everything else is using. So the page refresh, any animation is probably happening on the main thread as well, and that's just a terrible thing for audio. It causes lots of glitching, and yeah, I'm not so sure about the atomic support. But the other issue is more of a serious one in my mind. This might be a bit different on Android devices because that's, you know, obviously controlled by Google, and they've been pushing the web audio and audio worklet a lot harder than other people. So the problem with that is that Android audio isn't so good itself. So yeah, you're constantly fighting against the limitations of either that or you know, the web audio API latency itself. But it's working pretty well on desktop Chrome on Windows and Mac.
Right.
Yeah, and well on Firefox now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that takes us to the last. I mean, that was the last question, I think. So, thank you, Oli, for taking the time of sharing your trajectory, your journey, and why you keep doing iPlug2. And I think we had a great overview of the people who help you as well. We're part of the ecosystem. We've seen. We've seen. So I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. Faust. We've seen people from Serial Machines, people who use or use iPlug or work with you, and I seem to have great things to say about that. So congratulations on keeping the community engaged around your product. And yeah, I mean, I would love to invite you to lead workshops and help people, getting started building plugins with iPlug. I think that would be super interesting. And this is the last live stream of, well, not the summer, but before September. We're going to take a 6 weeks break, and then we will be back on 7th of September with Andrew Lego. And they will be, from September onwards, they will be happening on Mondays. So, Stefan, yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Stefan, the main developer of Faust. Yeah. So, well, thank you everybody for following on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. And I will see you in a few weeks. And Oli,
Bye.
bye bye. Thank you.